Good afternoon.
Hey, Eric.
Stuck together, stuck apart. Hi, Kammy. Family success during quarantine. And very psyched to be here with Kammy Kelton, who's co-hosting this with me. And we're brought to you by the Vermont Center for Family Studies. As many of you know, we exist to strengthen families in our community, families of all types, and strengthen family leaders, even family leaders who don't even think they're family leaders. And, we mostly do that by training professionals, but this stuff is pretty accessible if you just pay attention and think along with us. How you doing, Kammy?
I'm doing okay. Still hanging in there.
Good. Just to those of you, for those of you who may not be familiar with Zoom, we recommend that you use the speaker view. You have options about what you see on your screen. And up in the top right corner, there's gallery view and there's speaker view, different views. We recommend that you use speaker view for this event. So today, we're going to talk about couples in quarantine. And I'm very happy that we're going to have Sarah Davis, who's a licensed psychiatric nurse practitioner with us and an advanced student of Bowen theory, and is recently joined the faculty of the Vermont Center for Family Studies as our guest, right, Kammy?
Yes, so happy to have you here, Sarah.
Thank you.
And Kammy is also on the faculty of the Vermont Center for Family Studies and is a long time in the saddle private practice therapist in Waterbury.
Thank you. As Eric said before, VCFs is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to strengthen families through educating professionals and leaders and family members in Bowen family systems theory. And Eric is the executive director of VCFS. And outside of that, Eric's a leadership psychologist and an executive leadership development coach.
Thank you, Kammy.
Yeah. Today our schedule is going to look similar to the previous weeks, where for about half an hour, actually Sarah has prepared some slides around couples and some Bowen inspired thinking about couples. And Sarah and Eric and myself will talk a little bit and converse a little bit around those slides for about half an hour. And then we will go into breakout rooms at about the half-hour mark for 10 minutes with a couple of reflection questions to consider for that time. And then we'll come back from that and have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And then after that, we'll wind it down.
All right. And I just want to take a moment here before we get launched to talk about our training program, which we're accepting applications until June 1st. The applications are right there online on our website, btvt.org, bowentheoryvermont.org. It's not that complicated. There's a little challenging piece where we ask you to do a family diagram. And many people who've never done that before say, well, how do you do that? I don't know how to do that. Well, there's lots of tools online, but you can also just call us and talk about that if you want. But the application's there online. And if you have any questions too about the program, or you have questions about how to apply or what you need to do, Roz, who's our admin there, she's right there in the emails you've been getting. She's really, really helpful, and feel free to call us. We can talk to you about it. The program is morning meetings 8 times from September through April. And I wonder, Sarah Davis, would you just say a word? How would you describe the training program?
Well, so useful. I think Kammy said when you asked her a similar question, so useful for me personally and professionally. I think about it as it's like participating in a language immersion class for me. It is a way of keeping my my ability to think in this way, kind of keeping me more fluent in thinking systems. Again, so helpful personally and professionally, both with my patients and in the experiment of my life with my family and friends and so forth.
Awesome.
I keep, every year I sign up again because I find when we're not actually meeting once a month, the fluency slips a little bit. And I find I really benefit from being part of the group. So,
and I'm psyched that you'll be joining us this year as one of the people who's teaching it, along with Kammy and some others. So awesome. I love that language immersion metaphor. That's a good one. And it is because can be a little bit like disoriented. Well, we're going to do something different here in a positive way. I do want to take a moment here to, just before we launch now, to thank Pamela Real Estate too for sponsoring these. Absolutely awesome support from them on this. They do so much for the community, all kinds of things. Most people don't know a lot of what they do, but support the Boys and Girls Club and on and on. So just thank you, Pamela Real Estate, for helping us out here in our effort to make a contribution. Okay, couples in quarantine. Like the title, it reminds me of Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, as a title. You know, and that's such an interesting title for a book, because it is true that people who run zoos figured out that there's a little problem when you get these couples together in the zoo. They often stop mating. So how should we kick this off?
Well, why don't we, let's just have you cue up the first slide.
Okay.
Just get that in front of us and we'll just start talking about it.
Yeah. I like this icon that Microsoft generated. Throws a coin to same-sex couples and also shows a little, what are they? They're kind of, I don't know how they're going to get separated there. They seem to be a bit trapped. How do you like this quote, by the way?
Yes.
That's fresh today. I just got that from a client today.
That's good. Yeah, so I was reading the Times recently, this past weekend, and this article, the title just caught my eye. So, how to get your partner to take on more emotional labor. And I thought, how to get my partner to do anything? That's a trick I'd like to know more about.
That is in itself an emotional labor.
That's right. Exactly. And so, you know, but then I was thinking about, isn't it, we as couples, we get so much advice from our therapists, from our family and friends, from the media, certainly, and this is a good example of, you need to communicate more. You need to improve communication, talk more, process your feelings more. Not bad advice necessarily, but I think about, why doesn't that always help? Why does it sometimes make it worse when I try to do it anyway? And I hear from other reasonable people that it's not always as helpful as we might like. And so maybe it's the way we do it. And maybe it's a challenge that's very normal and natural for couples. And so how do we think about that? You know,
hey, can I just make a comment here? This picture, you see the blue person who's got the arm over? That reminds me of Cammy's Anne Lamott quote. Kammy, can you repeat that?
Anne Lamott, the quote is, helping is the sunny side of control.
Yes.
You see that there with the little grip?
Yeah.
The little grip. I mean, how tight is that grip there in the picture?
It's cutting off circulation.
There, I love this slide you put up, which comes straight from the New York Times, right? Starting with talking openly. And it's
Yes.
so true what you said, that it's just so quick. People are so quick to say, oh, well, there's a problem between a couple. This is what you do. Talk openly. Just throw talking at it.
Exactly. Talk about it.
Yeah.
Express yourself.
And
Right.
I would say if it works, it works.
Yeah.
But it often doesn't.
That's right. I totally agree. So let's go to the next slide. Again, so just tell your partner how you feel and they'll change. Now, I don't think, that's not really the intent of the advice typically. And it's also not usually our intent when we decide we're going to tell our partner how we feel. We don't sort of consciously think, I'm going to do this in order to change him or her. But I don't think, for me, I think about it, it's not a terrible thing to check what my agenda is as I go into this processing. And again, especially when emotions are running high. So this being driven by an anxiety, a discomfort, and wanting to try and fix something, this rush to fix. And so sometimes we go toward our partner to try and have them, we may not be consciously thinking about it, but are we wanting them to help us feel better, make us calm down, help us calm down? And I think where the trap is in this is focusing on either our partner or the relationship instead of ourselves. So we might go into this saying, I really want to do this differently. We just had an argument. Let's prevent this from happening next time. And here's what I think you might do better. Is essentially what we're often saying, right? And then that
subtext or right out straight spoken?
Well, it's often right out straight, right? Especially if we go into this thing with high emotion.
But if I really go to some training, Sarah, can I learn to make it just a subtext where I don't say it, but that's
we'll teach you how to do that. Yeah, that's
I want it to be a hidden message, a stealth message. This is all about you. I don't want them to know that that's what I mean.
Right. And that's where this helping, we often in our training conversations that we're talking about, because many of us are in helping professions, right? But we're often trying to help our partners, help the relationship. Somehow we become the relationship expert, right? So Erik, I'm going to quote you. You made a comment in a presentation you made, and you said, overheated honesty leads to reactivity. And I would love to just have you say a couple more things about that, because that really stuck with me, and that was, what I was thinking about here.
Overheated honesty is an interesting phrase. I think I stole that from Paul Simon, whose song Honesty is amazing on this topic. I think you wrote it here, anxiety-driven pursuit. So often, if our attempt to solve a problem in a high-stakes relationship is anxiety-driven, we're often trying to solve a process that's roots our anxiety or fear by spraying more anxiety at the problem.
Yes.
And that's just a common thing that humans do. I mean, we all do this. I probably did it today. But when this problem is a high-stakes one, it's very helpful when people can really deeply learn the skill of controlling that and getting out of that, moving out of that space, and maybe doing like that French mathematician said, sit in a room by yourself until it settles down, and then come and be more strategic.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, there can be a lot of aloneness when you're in a couple. And I think sometimes that's frightening. And that's what can push us towards trying to, as you say, we may spray more at it, more talk, more anxiety, more processing, whatever it is, because we're uncomfortable with feeling alone. We're supposed to be so together as a couple. Where are you? We're supposed to be together right now. But if we've just had a disagreement, or there's a high stakes issue, or a theme, right? With couples, most of us have a few central themes that we keep going back to. Right.
Sex, marriage, money, kids,
Right.
your mother. By the
Yeah.
way, you mentioned the word loneliness, and I wanted to just mention that we have an expert on the physiology of loneliness as our guest next week, Dr. Laurie Lassiter from Amherst, Massachusetts, who has done these amazing, she follows these amazing studies that are coming out about how relationships affect the body. Very powerful effect. And so I'm looking forward to hearing that. It's going to be a little more geeky.
Well, especially in this time of stay home, stay safe. Certainly themes around loneliness seem apropos. Do you want to move to the next slide?
Sure.
Okay. So this got me thinking, what does more effective processing or communication look like for couples? And this is a list that I came up with, and this notion of defining the responsible I to the we. So having more of that I position, defining myself to the relationship, to us, so that I don't lose track of me in the we of our togetherness. So I take responsibility for my part in this. I am responsible for myself and how I feel. I can tolerate my discomfort without blaming you for it. That's a tough one for me. I am responsible for calming myself down. I am expressing how I feel without needing you to change how you feel. Thoughts, comments?
I look at this list and it's so humbling to look at this list and think about how often and easy it is to be tripped up in those efforts. And it's a really tall order to try to live that. But it's such a helpful guide in terms of really redirecting attention to managing oneself versus focusing so much on the marriage or the partnership or the relationship, focusing on what's within my control and what is my potential role in what's going on.
Could that role, I think somebody could look at this and say, hey, what about a person who's just like taking on too much responsibility, even in an abusive situation, maybe where, one partner is violent and the other one thinks it's their fault, or even in a milder version of that where they're like depressed and just constantly thinking, oh gosh, why am I screwing up all the time?
So
let's think about that.
So yeah, that's a great, good point. And I think, so then you're thinking about self-blame as opposed to you're blaming self instead of blaming other.
Okay.
I'm thinking
two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. And I think as soon as we begin to focus on the other person, we lose our power. And what you were just talking about, those terrible, difficult, unsafe situations, I think that there is a loss of power and agency, and maybe this lofty list, even in those situations, could be helpful to bring myself back into the relationship. Maybe I've lost track of myself in the relationship.
Which could shake things up. Taking my responsibility for my part in this can sometimes mean being more authoritative, being more challenging, being less tolerant.
Less accommodating.
Yeah, it doesn't always mean being nicer.
No.
I love this thing you wrote about, I'm responsible for calming myself down. I can tolerate my discomfort without blaming you for it. These are very powerful mantras. And I think it is true that when the blame cycle gets going between people. And this might be worse now in quarantine. It's because this is going to pressure on these things. If people are feeling more discomfort, they might be doing more of that.
Mm. Yes.
Do you want to go to the next one?
Sure. So, Kammy, you thought the last list was a tall order. This one, this is just more of a tall order here, and I certainly recognize that. So I was thinking about the thinking person's guide, and I called it that because that's as opposed to the feeling person's guide. So one of the things we talk a lot about is thinking our way through situations as opposed to feeling our way through. And so what might more effective couples communication look like? Not attacking or defending. Again, this is sort of different language for blaming. And certainly that pursuit that can feel like an attack. You know, we haven't talked too much about the other side. Often in couples, I think, I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like often there's a person who is more, leans in a little bit more, is perhaps pursuing, fixing, solving, processing. And often the other person leans back and says, whoa, I need space. I can't do this. And sort of shuts down. And so defending that, and that's often a person who feels like they're being put on the defensive in the couple. Expressing without blaming self or partner, pausing before rushing to fix. Resisting the urge to preach or be the relationship expert. I think this is an easy one to get into. Again, perhaps those of us who are therapists, who are mental health clinicians, we may be especially vulnerable to this one. And then not going silent, which is the one I was talking about of sort of perhaps one person in the couple tends to go a bit silent, sort of gets a freeze, a flight or freeze response when there's conflict. Having something neutral to say. I wonder if we could play back the tape of any difficult conversation, heightened conversation we've had with our partner. If we could pick something out we said that was neutral, I think that might be hard to find in there. And then staying in contact even when the pot is stirred up. So I think a common dance for couples is something comes up, there's an issue, there may be this pursuit of, we need to talk about this, we need to fix this, the other person may go silent, and then there can create distance. I feel like a lot of couples have sort of do this distance thing that is uncomfortable, difficult. But again, I think it's so natural. I think it's couples struggling with balancing the togetherness and yet staying together and connected, and yet keeping your own individuality, yourself, at the same time, being free, being independent, not that emotional stuck togetherness that we talk about.
I just stopped shared. I just stopped the share for a minute.
So
what do you think about this, Kammy?
I'm thinking that this is so similar to some things we've been talking about in the past few weeks about the challenge of, in any relationship, of having adequate connection and adequate emotional space. And that challenge is very similar in partnerships. And I think about how people might be either struggling or finding creative ways in quarantine to find some balance between those two things that Sarah just was talking about, individuality and separateness and adequate connection. Yeah.
It's such a simple mantra, but people want to feel I'm comfortably connected, and they also want to feel I'm free to be myself. And that can be, that it's easy for that to fall out of balance in a relationship where a person starts to feel more crowded and imprisoned, or lonely. Even like Sarah said, I think some of the loneliest experiences people have are in a situation where that's with somebody who they used to be the closest with.
Right.
Now, that's an intensified version of loneliness.
It is, or even in the small moments of, again, when there's distance or conflict, being able to sit alone in the room, like your quote, with yourself, not in the room with your partner, for some period of time, until such time as you can talk about it more calmly, perhaps.
It makes the point that the foundation of a great relationship is the individual's relationships with themselves. And you in there, you had that item in there that said neutral, having something neutral to say. And I was thinking, just this morning, I was saying to someone that what's the most important responsibility of a spouse? And I think it might be that they have a good relationship with their own sense of peace. And same with parenting. Like, we just think, like, if you're in the mindset, I need a bigger house, I need more money, I need more sex, I need the house to be cleaner, whatever, all these things, or I'm not good enough, or I'm irritated. That's a vibe that is so tangibly felt by the people who you're closest to. Your kids just feel it. Versus another person who's saying, all is well. I'm okay with what I am, and I'm okay with what's going on here in my closest world, the other people here, the space I live in. That mindset, peace. I think that's foundational to family leadership. And as having something neutral to say comes naturally out of that mindset, without any techniques needed. But yeah, that's a tricky thing. But I like the idea that could be the big project for anyone wanting to make a couple better. They could start with that foundational project.
Yeah. So the idea would be, how does one find that degree of peace for themselves? And it's, my sense is it's not through what that image was on that New Yorker article, which is sort of trying to lead and grab at others to do certain things, like, I'll be at peace when the house is cleaner and you do your share.
Right.
But trying to find that within oneself, and I think in Bowen theory, there's this thought that couples who tend to make progress are couples who are really working on themselves individually, maybe even more so than on the marriage itself.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're trapped in frustration, probably a good place to start, if you could get to the point where you could find a way to actually be at peace with the situation just as it is. If you could find that, then the change efforts that flow from that are much more likely to work. And sometimes that's the solution right there. It's over, that's it, game over, because now maybe, like, just for example, I'm more attractive now because I'm more at peace. So people are moving towards me instead of moving away from me and retreat from my blaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's an idea.
It's amazing how often that works.
There's maybe we'll end with this for now before the breakout session there's a woman named Kathleen Smith who is a therapist and a writer, and she has an anxiety newsletter, and she is a Bowen thinker as well, and scholar. And I read some questions that she wrote, and it made me think about this topic. And one of them was something along the lines of, is asking oneself when you're in a couple and maybe there's an issue going on, is this an opportunity for me to experiment with being more emotionally mature with my partner? I don't think that's not word for word. I think I threw the word experiment in there because I sort of think of marriage as an experiment. Maybe that's because I'm married for the second time. But I like this notion of, not missing opportunities to try something different in terms of how I'm responding to the situation.
That's a great quote. Love it. Also to see the opportunity, always to pay attention to that. So should we pivot to breakouts?
Sure.
Okay, so we've done this now and I'm getting good feedback from it. And I've heard, one person said to me, every time the breakout's about to start, I think maybe I'll jump off the call now. But then I go through it and every time at the end, I'm glad I did. So if you want to jump off, and I've said this before, we're going to just keep doing this webinar and, take what you can from it and leave the rest. But I'm going to automatically put you now into breakouts of 2 or 3. And we have some questions that might stimulate some thinking in your breakout. So questions for discussion, or you could say reflection. Let me just let you look at those, and I'm going to suggest you pick one that kind of speaks to you. That's okay. I'd like to actually take a shot at answering that question, because if I do that, I'll be thinking it through myself to some degree. So I want to suggest the one you like the most to write it down. And then I'm going to use the Zoom tool to put you in, excuse me, breakouts. And, there'll be a timer. It's 10 minutes. There'll be a timer that'll give you a countdown as it's ending. And also, I've mentioned this before, I would suggest don't even worry about introducing yourself or worry about because the 10 minutes is going to fly by. If somebody just starts right in, say, here's what it got me thinking about. That way there's more opportunity for more people to talk and to integrate their thinking during the process. So going ahead now and enjoy your breakout rooms.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi there.
Are we all in this together?
So I'll just give you a minute, and what's kicking for you? What are you thinking about? What are your questions? If you would like to, you go like this, and then we'll unmute you and hear what you have to say. Kammy, Sarah, what was interesting in your breakouts?
A lot. I just feel like we could have talked for a long time with each other about it. This is great. It's a great topic. One thing that one person said was where we can get into difficulty when we are pursuing our partner after a difficult time is she said she can get into thinking, what about me? Where are my needs? Where am I, it's similar to you need to act to alleviate my distress. So what about me? Such a great way to put it. we thought.
You mean a kind of like an ineffective, what about me kind of thing, like an anxious, what about me? Or, yeah.
I think that's where she was going with that. Yeah.
I have observed this in myself, that it's if I'm really caught in reactivity in my family, it often has the same sound in my brain, which is I'm being wronged.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. 2 days, 3 days, sometimes 3 weeks later, I can see, wow, that whole narrative I'm being wronged is it's not real and it's not useful. But it can be so loud in my ears.
Yeah.
How about you, Kammy? Anything from yours?
We had some nice conversation about a variety of things. One of the things I'm struck by is we laughed quite a bit, and I think that what we there was some conversation about just self-recognition. You know, the question of how am I perhaps expressing myself ineffectively, you know, and a little story was shared about that. And, but with laughter. And I think that sometimes being able to sort of hold lightly some of this, and how you can see in everyday small moments yourself showing up both ineffectively and effectively, and kind of, you know, thinking about it as this whole messy mix to explore, and as Sarah would say, experiment with. And I do think there's something kind of helpful about being able to see oneself with a little bit of lightness in order to engage in that experiment.
So any hands? Anybody want to get in on this conversation? Love to hear what you're thinking about. Okay, Gordon, go for it. I'm going to unmute you. Okay. What are you thinking about, Gordon?
Well, it got me thinking about zoos and the emotional process that happens within a zoo, and the effect that it has on all the animals, the mammals, the species, the birds that are in some sort of captivity. And so that's kind of where my head was going. And the fact, I think you brought that up earlier, Erik, that to try to get animals to mate in a zoo can be particularly difficult for some species, and probably most. And so that's kind of, and then the opportunity, at least in Vermont, we can go out and take a walk in the neighborhood. We can drive to a trailhead and take a hike. And whereas some folks, I think it was in Spain, they were really kind of locked into and they could, just this past week, could go out at certain times of the day.
Wow.
And just the effect that it has on the emotional process internally. So just kind of thought.
Yeah, I just saw something about, even beyond COVID, there's more deaths in New York City than normal. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder how much of that is that they're in this zoo. You know, it's kind of a pleasant zoo, like modern zoos are, but we're all kind of in cages now.
Well, you know, I consult with this one organization, and the domestic violence has gone up. You know, I did a Google search on the 20 most populous cities in the world, and instances of domestic violence have gone up almost 20% in all those locations.
Wow.
And here in Vermont, it's gone up also. So,
Thank you.
So anyway, thanks.
Anybody else want to get in on this? Love to hear what you're thinking about. Lisa, go ahead.
Conversation about this forces your back against the wall a little, and that it can be an opportunity. And I was talking about just the feeling of not having enough emotional space. And I think it was Kathy mentioned, she said you can mistake separating an individuation with, can be mistaken and it's actually distancing. And I think it's just been that battle of like identifying how to get that emotional space. But that, when is that possibly actually distancing? That the mechanisms that, well, my example was what I used before to manage that distance those options aren't available anymore, like going to the office or having some separation between work and home. Mm. So this is an interesting thing to think about.
It is interesting. I wonder if there's more people kind of using emotional distance within the relationship in the same house now. Mm-hmm. Because yep. Like you say, they used to have this kind of go somewhere, get away.
Yeah,
and
exactly. That's what I was doing.
You could have people who are highly reactive to that. Why aren't you talking to me? How
Correct.
come you're looking at me?
Yep.
And personalizing that. That's an interesting question, Lisa, that I appreciate your question, the difference between differentiation and distance. So we talk about take a step back and spend your time in a room by yourself and so forth. I don't know. You got anything else on that?
I'm just observing more that I think the distancing, I'm just observing it more. I'm just noticing that that's what I do. And then I'm noticing that there might have been camouflaged ways that happened, that I cannot camouflage the distancing anymore. I don't like it. So it's an opportunity. Yeah, I don't know what we were just, so how can you bring more maturity? That is the ultimate question. So
we have 6 minutes more. Anybody else want to get on this? Yes, Kathy Sheffield. Let me unmute you.
Yeah, I was in on that conversation, and it spurred a realization in me that in the closed down emotional space that we're all talking about, and the increased pressure, that I had a serendipitous effect of that in terms of a pattern in a relationship that I've been working on for a long time. Made some real headway with that in really getting that kind of clarity that it takes us so long to get to, of knowing all the things in Sarah's slides and then actually believing it and acting on it in a neutral way. And I think it was precipitated by the amplification in it from the the pressure of this, and then it just dissolved. At least for time will tell, but yes. And so that was
what dissolved
in me, the needing to resolve it. I just took being able to take a neutral position and really see my end of it and act on it, and then the problem dissolves. Time will tell, but it I'm calling it a silver lining of the of the distress of the togetherness.
I'm liking this terminology of problem dissolving, and I think it's, why do people invest in a path like this? Why do people invest in learning Bowen theory or trying to spend a year meditating on the slides that Sarah Davis put up? And I do think that they have often the potential to dissolve problems. They don't always do that. And maybe it's not permanent, but it does have that power in it, whereas there are lots of methods that people use to try to fix things that make them worse.
I would say it dissolved in me,
Yeah.
at least for the time being.
Mm-hmm. And that's usually the primary
Changes the other one.
indication
Yeah.
of the problem in me, my experience of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kim Zigman. Maybe the last comment, and then we'll kind of wind up. I'm going to unmute Kim. Just one sec, Kim. We haven't got you unmuted yet. Okay, I think you're good now.
Okay. I just had an image of COVID being part of the relationship triangle, a relationship triangle, and wondering what's going to happen when COVID dies.
Mm.
That's all I wanted to say. It's just a thought.
Just going to leave us with that? You're just
I'm just going to leave you with it.
dropping the mic, and you're going to just stew in that? All right, winding down. Thank you, Kim. So I wanted to mention that we got this symposium coming up on June 5th, and I'm just going to quickly show you the image. And I think many of you know about this already, but we've shifted it to a 9 to 12:30 Zoom meeting. And so the faces on the slide here each will present, and you can see the details of their titles of their presentations. I'm really looking forward to this. The one in the top upper middle is Kathleen Smith, who Sarah Davis read a quote from. She's a writer and on the faculty center of the Bowen Center. And she's going to talk about working with young adults using Bowen theory. And she's written a humorous book about anxiety and Bowen theory. So we'll be celebrating her book a little bit there. And if you want to support us, we're doing this webinar kind of on a total shoestring. It's a lot of volunteer energy in the Vermont Center for Family Studies. Always has been 25 years now, many, many people contributing to this. We could use support, and along with coming to our events, registering for this symposium that allows us to do things like this for free, and also contributing by making a donation. If you're moved to do that, if you're appreciating what we're up to, we welcome it, and you can do that through our website. And I wanted to mention again, Laurie Lassiter next week. In Quarantine, the Physiology of Loneliness. I don't know, Sarah Davis, do you want to say a word about Laurie Lassiter, just to give people who don't know her a sense of her?
Laurie is, I think you said we were going to geek out a little bit when she joins us next week, and I'm sure that'll be true. But at the same time, oh my gosh, she has an ability to say things in a way that is accessible. She weaves in some of her own experience, even as she may be geeking out about the physiology of the triangle or something like that. So I think she's very interesting to listen to. And I mentioned the triangle. Has done so much interesting writing and research on the triangles in our lives, the effects that they have. Maybe she'll touch on that when she's talking about loneliness.
I'm looking forward to interviewing her and seeing what she's thinking about the quarantine. Some of these things people have just been talking about, you know, the camouflage that gets ripped off, as Lisa has put it, and the last comments there about and Gordon's about how this is affecting people in ways that may not be so visible, but are quite predictable. And here's a quote to end on. I don't know, Sarah, you want to say anything about this? Or?
I almost don't. I think it's so simple and beautiful. I chose it. I was inspired by the topic that we're thinking about this week. And I was reminded of the quote by Rumi, just that maybe there's a place where we can get to in our relationships where we're not trying to prove that we're right or wrong, or prove that you're wrong and I'm right, but that we can just meet in the middle. And
meet you there.
Meet you there.
I'll meet you there.
Yep.
All right. Have a good week, folks.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.